Good evening and thank you for joining us. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority has rolled out 9 measures that support small and medium enterprises in obtaining financing from banks. They include a half-year transition period for bank clients after any credit limit adjustment and no early repayment mortgage for SMEs. The uncertain economic outlook continues to cast a shadow over the city's business environment, forcing some major chain restaurants to close and the downsizing of this major supermarket chain that have been in business for 40 years, as well as this Hong Kong-style restaurant chain. With that, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, along with a banking sector SME lending coordination mechanism, announced the rollout of 9 measures. Under the scheme, 11 participating banks will not demand early repayments from mortgage borrowers who make payments on schedule. When credit limits are adjusted, clients will be given at least 6 months of transition period. For SMEs facing financial difficulties, another sympathetic measure from banks in providing suitable credit relief. To ease corporate clients' cash flow pressure, banks will consider loan restructuring and extending the duration of the partial principal repayment. The application period for the guarantee products under the government's SME Financing Guarantee Scheme would be extended for 2 years to the end of March 2026. Banks will work to expedite loan approvals for the scheme. Banks will also improve the transparency of fees for SMEs banking services. Banks will also consider fee waivers, interest, or other concessions for SMEs in need. Convenience will be given to SMEs wishing to switch lending banks. The original lending bank will commit to provide the client's existing credit information to the client within 7 working days. Retail sector lawmaker Peter Xu said the measures offer a relief for many businesses struggling with their finances. Andrew Kwok, president of the Hong Kong Small and Medium Enterprises Association, said the reduction of 0.1 to 0.2% of interest rate for loans will help businesses a lot, but he said it could be harder for banks to implement the credit relief. The Boao Forum for Asia opened in Hainan today. Delivering the keynote speech, Zhao Leji, the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, said Asian countries should work together for peace and development amidst a tense global geopolitical situation. Mimosa Ngai reports.
The theme of this year's Boao Forum for Asia is Asia and the World, Common Challenges, Shared Responsibilities. In his keynote speech, Chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, Zhao Leji, spoke about global challenges and opportunities.
The world economic recovery is lackluster. Problems and conflicts keep emerging. Peace and development face grave challenges. Against such a backdrop, do we work in solidarity to tackle the risks and challenges? Or do we cling to the zero-sum mentality?
Zhao called on Asian countries to work together to help foster global peace and stability.
We should jointly maintain security in Asia and contribute positive energy to world peace and stability. History and reality both show that peace and stability are the common aspirations of Asian people.
Zhao also said the Chinese market is large and robust, and that foreign countries will benefit from it if they invest in China. Speaking at Boao, Chief Secretary for Administration Eric Chen said he had not heard business people and government officials expressing concern about Article 23 of the Basic Law at the forum. Chen said that is understandable because people like to conduct business in a safe and stable environment. News 9, TVB News.
Crowds were seen at West Kowloon train station today as some residents are traveling across the border to spend the upcoming Easter holiday. Up until 4 p.m., about 450,000 people had traveled in and out of Hong Kong via different checkpoints. Long queues were seen in the departure hall of the West Kowloon station. Most train tickets were sold out. Some parents brought their children along for the Easter break, which begins on Friday. The Immigration Department expects about 11 million visitors will travel in and out of the city over the Easter and Qingming holidays. This is the 54th day of the national security trial of Jimmy Lai, who has pleaded not guilty to 1 count of sedition and 2 charges related to the national security law. Witness Andy Lee today said British Conservative politician Luke de Pulford had mentioned the need to overturn the Communist Party of China. In the trial today, witness Andy Lee, who is an activist, continued to face direct examination in court. Lee told the prosecution that British politician Luke de Pulford contacted him through Telegram before the enactment of national security law, asking him to change strategies to kill the CCP. In his reply, Lee said he would love to take up the position to carry out such an action. Lee set up an anti-national security law website and asked local and overseas politicians to sign statements. The hospital authority has teamed up with the Hong Kong Science Park to launch a data collaboration lab today. Around 200,000 patient healthcare records from the hospital authority will be shared with eligible biotech companies for research and development work. The identity of patients will be kept under wraps. The Chief Executive's 2021 policy address proposed promoting the sharing of the Hospital Authority's database with the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park for research purposes. On Thursday, a remote data platform was established for eligible science park companies to access such data. The platform has 200,000 patient healthcare records collected between 2007 and 2017. They include patients' diagnoses, hospital admission records, surgery and medication records, as well as vaccination and radiological procedures undertaken. All data have been anonymized. The Hong Kong Science Park said it has received numerous inquiries, with around 10 to 20 applications from their companies hoping to access the data from the Hospital Authority.
The use of real-world data is very important. You need to use a lot of that data to train your, we call training data set, in order to improve that algorithm. No matter whether it's diagnostic using patient data in the database to validate your diagnostic tools, or using images.
The companies that applied cover research on diagnostics, therapeutics, as well as others. Each eligible company can only access a platform for 5 days, and they can download or copy patients' data outside the remote desktop alongside various security protocols.
The science park setup is in a designated environment, and this environment has all the security cameras, and only the company who are authorized and approved by Science Park under the contract arrangement will be allowed to go in there.
The HA also hopes the R&D efforts from Science Park can ultimately help the service of the city's public hospitals. A Taiwan residential site used for the development of private subsidized sale flats under a pilot scheme began its public tendering process today. But some developers expressed lackluster interest after reviewing the site's conditions of sale. The tender invitation for the lot opens today and closes on July 19th. The project is located near Chaiwan MTR station and has to build no less than 700 residential units. At least 70% of them should be no smaller than 375 square feet. The flats should be sold at a discount of 35% to eligible homebuyers. The conditions of sale also stated the need to build amenities, including an elderly daycare center. The developer should also be responsible for building a footbridge. The works should be completed by September 2030 at the latest. A developer said the extra clauses have increased the project's costs and therefore made it much less appealing. In Japan, 4 people are believed to have died after consuming health supplement products containing an ingredient called benikoji. More than 100 people are reported to be unwell. Yoshimasa Hayashi, Japan's chief cabinet secretary, said today that some products from Kobayashi Pharmaceutical, billed as helping to lower cholesterol, contained benikoji, which is a red species of mold. Hayashi said the related ministries are working together to formulate a response and inform foreign countries who may have imported the products. Welcome back. The U.S. Coast Guard are continuing to search for the bodies of 4 workers who were thrown from the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore when it collapsed after a giant cargo ship crashed into it early Tuesday. 2 bodies have already been recovered. This, as the White House says it will provide support for this recovery and rebuilding process. Tracy Furness has more.
The construction workers who went missing in the Baltimore bridge collapse all came from Mexico or Central America before settling in the Maryland area. Martin Suezo Sandoval's brother is one of those still missing. My brother could swim, and we have faith that he could have been able to get out anywhere, but we are still waiting for official news of what happened. God willing, my brother is alive, Sandoval said. Maryland State Police say the bodies of the two men found were inside a submerged pickup near the bridge.
Shortly before 10 a.m., divers located a red pickup truck submerged in approximately 25 feet of water in the area of the middle span of the bridge. Divers recovered two victims of this tragedy trapped within the vehicle.
They were 35-year-old Alexandro Hernandez Fuentes from Mexico and 26-year-old Dorian Roniel Castillo Cabrera from Guatemala, both living in Maryland. The victims were part of a construction crew fixing potholes on the bridge. Authorities say all search efforts have been exhausted, and based on sonar scans, they believe other vehicles with victims are encased in material from the collapsed bridge. Meanwhile, Tuesday's collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge brought back jarring memories to people who survived previous bridge collapses. Two survivors recollect the 2007 Minnesota bridge collapse.
I think there was a lot of fear that came into my head, my life after the fact, because this inconceivable thing, the ground falling out from beneath my feet, had happened.
I kind of looked up at a freeway sign, the Washington Avenue exit freeway sign, and it started twisting and racking. And at that moment, I realized that the bridge was about to come down. And I was sitting on a bridge support over an expansion joint. And then it just split apart like a gigantic zipper.
Tracy Furness, TVB News.
24 investigators from the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board have been assigned to the accident for what will be a long investigation into why this disaster happened. NBC reports.
While the Dolly remains trapped under tons of wreckage from the collapsed bridge, NTSB teams were on board today, gathering evidence and identifying key crew members to interview. Already, investigators have downloaded data from the ship's so-called black box, including the ship's speed, position, power, and throttle settings at 1:30 a.m. Tuesday.
That will help us, enable us to begin to put together a timeline of events that occurred prior to the striking of the bridge.
NTSB Chief Hamady says investigators will also look at whether the ship received contaminated fuel, which could have shut down the engines, causing it to lose power before crashing into the bridge. Engineering experts calculate it hit with roughly 30 million pounds of applied force.
A bridge like this one, completed in the 1970s, was simply not made to withstand a direct impact on a critical support pier from a vessel that weighs about 200 million pounds.
While the Key Bridge was built to 1970s standards, those standards changed after a freighter hit Tampa's Sunshine Skyway Bridge in 1980, killing 35 people. Today, bridge support structures must be protected with barriers, like reinforced islands on Tampa's new Skyway Bridge.
If the bridge had been designed to the revised specifications that took into account the ship collision conditions for that bridge, it would not have collapsed.
Nearly a dozen ships are tonight trapped inside the port, even more outside, amid warnings that the supply chain and livelihoods are in jeopardy.
We are concerned about the local economic impact, with some 8,000 jobs directly associated with port activities.
Michael Clark's business receives and empties containers from the port, then ships the freight. Now he's losing business that's going to other ports.
Right now, we don't have any containers and we can't get any containers. So immediately our business is shut down.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights said it is plausible that Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war in Gaza, where hundreds of thousands of people are facing famine. Volker Turk said in a media interview that if such an intent was proven, it could amount to a war crime. Meanwhile, a team of foreign doctors are spending 2 weeks in a Gaza hospital. Nasfi Karim has more.
One young person after another, overwhelming medics at this Gaza hospital. Doctors visiting the Gaza Strip were stunned by the number of children flooding into the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, which has a bed capacity of 160, but is dealing with 800 patients. Tanya Haj Hassan from Jordan was among 7 doctors on a 2-week mission to Gaza, where most of the 36 hospitals are out of commission, and the one they worked in was only partially functional.
It's catastrophic. There are so many injuries. They have overwhelmed the capacity of not just this hospital, but the entire healthcare system that has been targeted and collapsed months ago. And that on top of outbreaks of epidemics, malnutrition, and deterioration in people's general health.
With Israeli airstrikes continuing to rain down on Gaza, in the occupied West Bank, an attacker wounded 3 people after opening fire at vehicles on a main route. This in the midst of increasing settler violence and crackdowns against Palestinians in the region. In neighboring Jordan, pro-Hamas protesters took to the streets in the capital Amman. They demanded the government cancel its peace treaty with Israel and stop using Jordan as a land bridge for goods between the Gulf states and Israel. On the diplomatic front, the United States has confirmed that talks aimed at bringing Israeli officials to Washington have resumed. This week, Israeli officials cancelled a planned trip to the US to discuss potential military options in Rafah in southern Gaza. It came after Washington refused to block a UN Security Council resolution seeking an immediate ceasefire during the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan.
We do think it's important that that meeting happen. As we've said, we think that the plan that Israel has said it intends to pursue with respect to Rafah is one that would be a mistake, and we think there's a better way.
After Monday's UN vote, Gang Shuang, China's deputy permanent secretary to the body, insisted the resolution must be implemented and that a 2-state solution to the decades-old Middle East problem be established as soon as possible. Nazri Karim, TVB News.
China's Ministry of Commerce announced the cancellation of the anti-dumping duty on wine from Australia, which will come into force on Friday. Sakura Ip has talked to some wineries planning to re-establish the Chinese market soon.
There had been an oversupply of grapes in recent years, and a lot of the fruit was destroyed. The Australian wine industry struggled as a result of China's punitive wine tariffs, but this might change now. China's Ministry of Commerce has announced the cancellation of the anti-dumping duty on wine from Australia, which will come into force on Friday. According to the Australian Grape and Wine, China's market accounts for 40% of the wine export from Australia. The mainland China market is worth about $1 billion Australian dollars. Australian wine merchants said they will focus on high-end wine to be more competitive.
People are tending to drink a little bit less by volume. They're still drinking at reasonably good price points. Over the last couple of years, other producer nations have taken some of that market share that Australian wine had in China as well. And one of those producer nations is, of course, China itself, which has seen serious growth in its vineyard area and its winemaking capability.
In this winery located in Sutton Forest in Canberra, these boxes of wine have been sitting in a warehouse for 3 years, but they are finally going to embark on the journey to China, which accounts for 80% of this winery's production. Charlie Wang, the owner of this winery, said he has relied on the limited local market for the past few years. He plans to visit China soon to re-establish his business. He also expects business to return to the pre-pandemic levels within 1 year. Zachary, TVB News.
In New York, congestion in the busiest part of Manhattan has become so bad, the authorities are set to introduce tolls, the first city in the U.S. to do so. Transport authorities have approved congestion tolls on drivers entering a central business district, with a fee of $15 for most motorists headed to downtown Manhattan. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority Board voted on Wednesday to greenlight the congestion pricing plan, expected to go into effect in June. The $15 is for most commuter passenger vehicles that drive into Manhattan south of 60th Street. Tolls are higher for larger vehicles and lower for late-night entries into the city, as well as for motorcycles. Opponents say the plan will cost commuters millions. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.